Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. In this video, we're going to talk about exercise snacks, which really is as minimalistic as you can possibly get with exercise. And they seek to solve what I would argue is the biggest problem people tend to have for their health from a lifestyle perspective. So, a little bit of background before we get into what they are, who should do them, why you should do them, all that sort of stuff. There is nothing more harmful to your health than being inactive. And there is nothing better for your health than regular, consistent, structured exercise. And this is reflected through a few different lenses. So, one, no matter what you compare exercise to from a lifestyle perspective, again, we're staying in that realm, whether it's nutrition or anything else, exercise as an isolated intervention tends to produce the best outcomes in terms of how long you'll live, how well you'll live, whatever biomarker you want to measure, etc. Moreover, VO2 max, which is a measure of cardiovascular fitness, and grip strength, which in the research is used as a proxy for sort of full body strength because that's very easy to test. Those two measures tend to predict how long and again, how well someone will live better than almost anything else you can measure. So, in other words, if you imagine your health as a boat that has a number of holes in it, causing it to sink, being inactive, if you are currently inactive, is the biggest hole in the boat, causing it to sink the fastest. Despite this, the vast majority of Americans do not meet minimum physical activity guidelines. We'll quantify what those are in a little bit and what defines being inactive. But in any case, the point right now is that the biggest hole in people's boat, if we're analogizing their health to a boat, is being inactive and it's being left unplugged. And now there's a number of different sort of most commonly cited reasons why people report not meeting physical activity guidelines. One of them is a fear of injury due to exercise. Another is lack of time. Another is a lack of access or cost of resources and things like that. There are a number of others that you'll see, but those three are usually the most commonly cited reasons why people don't meet minimum physical activity guidelines. And exercise snacks are a strategy that seek to address this quite well, in my opinion. So, with all that said, the plan for the rest of this video is to talk about what an exercise snack actually is, the health benefits that have been shown in the research to be a result of exercise snacks. We'll then move into a step-by-step process of how to set up your own exercise snack protocol. And then I'll give you some example ones just to put it in a bit more practice and make it a bit more real. So in the research, an exercise snack is usually defined as a very brief, very high intensity bout of movement that is usually performed either throughout the day or throughout the week. The idea is that you're essentially microdosing exercise at various points throughout the day or throughout the week. In terms of total duration, they usually last anywhere from 15 seconds to 5 minutes in duration. At least in the exercise snacks that have been tested thus far, this is how long they have lasted, the ones that have actually shown benefit. And I just want to point this out real fast, or highlight this, I should say, this 15-second bout of exercise, because it's very understandable that some people are incredibly busy, have families, have work, all this sort of stuff, don't have time for full workouts, let's say. But it's very hard for me to rationalize the idea that someone doesn't have 15 seconds at some point in the day. And again, this 15 seconds, this is a duration of exercise that performed daily with some sort of structure and some thought behind it, mind you, has shown improvements in both health and fitness in terms of different ways you would measure that. So if we go back to lack of time being one of the barriers to physical activity guidelines, again, 15 seconds doing that once a day is not going to put you at the minimum physical activity guidelines, but benefit has been shown with bouts of exercise that last just this in duration. Now, when you look at the broader research of exercise snacks, there's a lot of different protocols that have been used and tested. We'll discuss some of those coming up. And in large part, the benefits that people see from them are just the benefits that you would see from undergoing exercise that you would see, in any other sort of exercise intervention. So these include improved VO2 max, which again is a measure of cardiovascular fitness. It assesses how well your body is able to get oxygen out of the air and then into muscles and then be put to work. I do have another article video on that if you're interested in that. And then reduced blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic. Reduced fasting glucose. That is the only measure of glucose metabolism, I believe, that has been tested. I don't think HbA1c has been tested with this. Reduced LDL and slightly increased HDL. And again, there probably are other health benefits you could measure that you would see improved. These are just the only ones that have been tested thus far, so the only ones I can really reasonably report on. But something else really worth pointing out is that no record of injury or pain has been recorded as being the result of an exercise snack intervention, despite this usually being done in sedentary, inactive populations, as well as oftentimes being done with no warm-up. Because again, the whole point of doing an exercise snack as part of your weekly routine is for time management and to make it as time efficient and minimalistic as you possibly can. Now, these benefits are benefits you would experience if you can be classified as sedentary or inactive through any way that those terms can be defined. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. The most common ways you would define someone as being sedentary or inactive is through whether or not they're meeting the minimum physical activity guidelines, or if they're just not very active, generally speaking, throughout the day. So for most institutions, whether it's the CDC, the ACSM, whatever the case may be, the minimum physical activity guidelines are usually 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic cardiovascular activity and 60 to 120 minutes of strength training per week. Usually that's oftentimes said as, 2 sessions per week of strength training activity, but that's a perfectly fair definition. And again, you can also be classified as sedentary if you're just not very active throughout the day. That's usually measured through step count. And with regard to steps per day, 10,000 steps per day is usually like the big buzzword that gets tossed around most commonly. Typically, the more steps per day that you accumulate, the better your health is going to be. Like, there's a somewhat dose response relationship. There is a bit of a diminishing return with increased step count. So for instance, going from 12,000 steps per day to 14,000 steps per day is not going to give you the same benefit as going from 4,000 to 6,000 steps per day. Most of the health benefits in terms of decreasing risk of death from any sort of chronic disease tend to be maxed out at an average step count per day of about 7,000. If you're under 5,000 steps per day, then you are considered sedentary by most institutions again, but the average American gets 3,000 per day. So the average American measured via activity throughout the day would be classified as sedentary. So again, if you can be considered inactive, measured by either number of weekly trainings per week or physical activity on average throughout the day, if it's one or both of these, then you are likely to benefit from exercise snacks being part of your routine. If you are okay in both these categories, then your attention is most likely better devoted somewhere else in terms of improving your health and fitness and stuff like that. So before we move on to some of the more tactical stuff, just a few things that I thought were worth pointing out based on what we've talked about thus far. I've had a number of clients who struggle with the idea of this very low dose of exercise being implemented. Usually these people are coming from being inactive and being sedentary. And one of the things that'll work to implement with them just to get started is oftentimes a 5-minute daily routine to follow, something very simple, but just something to build the habit. And again, oftentimes my real intent with something like that is just to build the practice of exercising as part of your usual routine and make it hopefully over time feel more weird to not exercise than it is to exercise. But again, if you're going from no exercise to 5 minutes a day, there are real, noticeable, meaningful health benefits and fitness benefits you can achieve from doing that. Again, even as low as 15 seconds with a structured, thought out plan does provide benefit. So there is no amount of exercise that is too low to where it becomes not worth it. Any exercise, no matter how low, becomes better than no exercise. It certainly is true that more might be better, but that doesn't mean that something is equivalent to nothing. Something else worth pointing out is that exercise is way safer than people tend to think. Again, all of the protocols that I'll talk about in just a second and these exercise snack protocols are usually implemented in people who are inactive, measured by one of the definitions we talked about before. And they oftentimes do not include a warm-up because, again, the whole point of doing this is to be as time efficient and make this as seamless and easy to adhere to as possible. So again, inactive populations, no warm-up, no injury or pain has been recorded as a result of exercise snacks. And just for some further context on the safety of exercise, the way an activity is usually measured in terms of its risk of injury is by the number of injuries that occur per 1,000 hours of participation. So in the sport of powerlifting, which is just a squat, bench, and deadlift, training that sport tends to produce an injury rate of about 1 to 4 injuries per 1,000 hours of participation. CrossFit includes everything, but has a pretty good reputation of being very injurious. Typically has an injury rate of about 2 to 3 injuries per 1,000 hours of participation. Soccer and basketball are both similar with an injury rate of about 8 to 32 injuries per 1,000 hours of participation. And that depends on the level of competition, if it's a match versus a game versus a practice or whatever the case may be. But again, 2 to 8 times the injury rate as something like powerlifting and CrossFit. You tell most people that you're going to deadlift with a barbell and they'll say something like, oh, be careful, watch your back, things like that. But you tell them you're going to play pickup basketball and they don't bat an eye. They say, go have fun. Even though statistically speaking, you are way safer on a deadlift platform or a squat rack than you are on a soccer field. And now this isn't a call to action to stop playing soccer or basketball. Those injury rates are still pretty low, especially compared to the health benefits and fitness benefits and social benefits and everything you would get from doing those. But the point is, just to put this in context, that structured exercise, especially the exercises that people tend to think are the most dangerous, are in reality super safe and have a very low risk of injury. And then finally, the health benefits of exercise really can be achieved by anyone. And the exercise snacks that we're going to talk about, they can be done in your living room, in a hotel room, on the side of a highway. Probably not best to do it there, but point is, you don't need anywhere in particular to do them. So with that all said, let's talk about actually setting up an exercise snack routine. The first thing you need to do is select what exercise you're going to use for the exercise snack. And it really, in all likelihood, does not matter what exercise you choose. The important thing is the intensity of the exercise, not the exercise itself. So you could use bodyweight squats, chair squats, lunges, stairs, running, plank, Superman push-ups, knee push-ups, heels elevated push-ups. Again, whatever you prefer and whatever you have access to is what you should choose, as long as it allows you to reach the target intensity you need for the exercise snack to become worth it. Because again, I want to hone in on this. The intensity does matter. Going for an easy walk for a minute is, in general, a good, nice thing to do, but it's not going to give you the benefits that are reported in the research from exercise snacks. Doing as many bodyweight squats or chair squats as possible within 1 minute is significantly higher intensity than going for an easy walk, and is very likely to give you all the benefits that we talked about before. So again, doesn't matter what exercise you select, as long as you like to do it, you will do it. It allows you to reach those intensities, and that's about it. The next thing to do is to identify the dosing of that exercise that you're going to do within any individual exercise snack. And you can set this up in terms of how many reps of the exercise you're going to do, or in terms of how long you're going to do it for. If you're choosing something like a plank, then obviously you're sort of locked into time duration as being your means of dosing. But if you're doing bodyweight squats, you can set a number of reps, like let's say you start at 10, or you start out at as many squats as possible in 30 seconds. These are not fixed numbers by any means. As you get better and more comfortable doing this and more regular with doing it, you can increase this as time goes on. And again, it also doesn't matter how low you set this, because if you were inactive before, even doing as many bodyweight squats as you can in 15 seconds is going to give you benefit. So just identify a dose in terms of number of reps or time that is tolerable, that you can do, that you will do, and then stick with that for a little bit and then increase that over time if you'd like to, or if you feel that you are able to. The third step is to set up your schedule of how often or how frequently you're going to do these exercise snacks. And now the only rule that I typically tell people in terms of how many of these to do in the week is to have more exercise snacks than in the week than there are days in the week. And the only really reason I say that is because, to my knowledge, the study that showed the lowest amount of exercise snacks done in the week that actually showed benefit was a study where they had their subjects perform they ascended a 3 flights of stairs, I believe, as quickly as they possibly could for breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Apart from that, whatever schedule or structure is easiest for you to adhere to from just a life flexibility scheduling perspective is what you should choose. And there's really no wrong answer past that. So you can do these daily, twice daily, or 3 times per day. You can do them every day, just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like I just said, or you can do them only on work days. Whatever makes the most sense for your preference and for your life and your schedule is what you should choose. Now, with that said, I do think there is some value in making this a daily practice, something you do every day. And the reason I say that is because the clients I've taken on who were sedentary before and who had the best success long-term afterward were not the ones who necessarily got the best training and nutrition programming from me, but the ones who really incorporated exercise as part of their core identity, meaning that for them to miss a workout would be as weird to them as missing brushing their teeth or something like that. And that change in identity isn't necessarily something you can speak into existence. It's something you have to actively do, and that occurs as a result of the actions that you take. And with this being a daily practice, every day you're making that vote to change your identity to that person who is someone who just exercises regularly. But again, a non-daily schedule like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or work days only isn't wrong, as long as you actually do it and adhere to it long term. Because you'll get none of these benefits that we talked about before if you don't actually do the exercise snack regularly long term. So just to finish up, just a few example protocols you could follow if you just want to plug and play and don't want to think about it too much. So first example, 15 seconds of bodyweight squats, as many as you possibly can, performed 2 times per day, in the morning and in the evening. There should be another parentheses there. And this is something you would do daily. Second exercise snack would be a 15-second plank, a 15-second Superman. Repeat that 2 times with no rest in between for a total work time of 60 seconds. Do that 1 time per day, either in the morning or in the evening, doesn't really matter. Do that daily. Third example is to ascend one flight of stairs as quickly as you possibly can. Do this 3 times per day, like a breakfast, lunch, dinner kind of schedule, at least 2 hours apart, and do this on work days only. And again, this is a protocol that I took directly from one of the research papers that will be cited down below. Fourth example is do 15 seconds of bodyweight squats, as many as possible in the morning, 15 seconds of push-ups, knee push-ups, feet elevated, doesn't matter, in the evening. And this is something that you would do daily. And again, I bring this example up really just to point out the fact that you can mix and match. You don't have to set any one exercise as what you do long-term forever. You can, plug and play whatever exercise you want to do and, customize this as much as you want. Fifth example is to run for 1 minute, performed 1 time per day. Excuse me, perform that daily in the evenings. And with that said, I'm going to wrap this video up here. I hope you found that somewhat helpful, interesting, or somewhere in between. If you have any questions about anything I said throughout this video, don't hesitate to comment down below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Hope you have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.